My name is Elias, and I've been driving trucks for over a decade. I prefer the night shifts. There's something peaceful about the solitude, the world asleep while I navigate the highways. That night, I was hauling a load of electronics to a warehouse in Nebraska, a route I knew well. The moon was a sliver in the sky, offering little light, and my headlights carved through the darkness like twin beams of hope. About an hour past midnight, I saw him. A figure standing on the side of the road, thumb extended in the universal gesture of a hitchhiker. It was odd, seeing someone out here in the middle of nowhere. Against my better judgment, I slowed down and pulled over. Maybe it was the loneliness of the road getting to me, or perhaps a sense of duty to help another soul in need. He approached the truck, and as he got closer, I could make out his features. He was young, maybe in his early 20s, with a gaunt face and hollow eyes. His clothes were outdated, like something out of an old photograph. He climbed into the passenger seat without a word, and I pulled back onto the road. "Thanks for the ride," he finally said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "No problem." "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation light. "Just up ahead," he replied vaguely, staring straight ahead. We drove in silence for a while, the road unspooling before us. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air inside the cab felt heavy, charged with an unsettling energy. I glanced at him occasionally, noting his pallor and the way he seemed almost transparent under the dim dashboard light. "What's your name?" I asked, hoping to break the eerie silence. "Thomas," he said, turning to look at me. His eyes were dark pools, devoid of light. "And you are Elias." I froze. I hadn't told him my name. "How did you know that?" He smiled. A sad, knowing smile. "I know a lot about you, Elias. More than you'd think." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" Thomas leaned back in his seat, eyes still fixed on me. "I've been on this road a long time. I see people come and go. Some make it, some don't. You, Elias, you've been running for a long time." His words struck a nerve. I had my demons, like everyone else. But how could he possibly know? "What are you talking about?" "Your past," he said simply. "You can't outrun it forever." The silence between us grew heavier, almost tangible. Thomas's words echoed in my mind, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. I focused on the road, the white lines blurring together as my thoughts drifted back to memories I had long buried. The night my father died, the guilt I carried for not being there, the strained relationship with my brother, things I never spoke about, not to anyone. As we continued down the road, the temperature inside the cab dropped noticeably. I could see my breath misting in front of me, and the windows began to frost over. The radio, which had been playing soft rock, suddenly filled with static. Then a woman's voice cut through. "Help me," it whispered, repeating over and over. I turned the radio off, my hands shaking. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice trembling. Thomas nodded, his expression unreadable. "She's been looking for you." "Who? What do you mean?" I demanded, panic rising in my chest. "You'll see," he said cryptically. Then, the headlights began to flicker. The road ahead seemed to twist and warp, shadows dancing at the edges of my vision. I struggled to keep the truck steady, my heart pounding in my chest. I glanced at Thomas, but he was gone. The passenger seat was empty, the door still closed. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a halt. My hands were slick with sweat, my mind racing. I looked around frantically, but there was no sign of him. Just the empty highway stretching into the darkness. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. Maybe I was hallucinating, the product of too many sleepless nights and too much caffeine. But then I saw a photograph on the passenger seat. I picked it up with trembling hands. It was old, the edges worn and yellowed. In it, a young man stood beside a truck, his arm around a smiling woman. The man was Thomas. I stared at the photo, my mind reeling. How was this possible? I looked closer and saw something else, my truck in the background. It was unmistakable, down to the license plate. But the photo looked like it was taken decades ago. My heart raced as I pieced it together. Thomas wasn't just a hitchhiker, he was a ghost, a remnant of a tragic past. I had to know more. I needed answers. That night, sleep eluded me. I kept replaying the events in my mind, trying to make sense of it all. The frost on the windows, the static on the radio, the woman's voice, none of it made any logical sense. But deep down, I knew there was something more. something I had to confront. The next day, after delivering my load, I drove to the nearest town and found a library. I spent hours poring over old newspapers and archives, looking for any mention of Thomas. Finally, I found a small article from the late 1970s about a young couple who died in a tragic accident on Route 63. Their car had broken down, and they were hit by a truck while trying to get help. The trucker was never found. The article included their names, Thomas and Mary. The photograph in my hand matched the description perfectly. My blood ran cold as I realized the truth. Thomas had been trying to warn me, to make me face my past. The road I traveled was the same one where he and Mary had met their end. I felt a heavy weight lift from my shoulders. For years, I had been running from my own guilt, my own mistakes. Thomas's words echoed in my mind, "You can't outrun your past forever." With a newfound resolve, I decided to make amends. I tracked down Mary's family, who were still alive and living in a small town not far from the highway. I visited them and told them everything, from picking up Thomas to the supernatural events that followed. They listened in stunned silence, tears streaming down their faces. In the end, they forgave me. They had lived with their own grief and unanswered questions for too long. My confession brought them some measure of peace, a sense of closure. As I left their house, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The ghosts of the past had finally been laid to rest. That night, as I drove down Route 63 one last time, I felt a presence beside me. I glanced over and saw Thomas, not as a ghost, but as a young man, whole and at peace. He nodded at me, a silent acknowledgement, before fading away into the night. I continued my journey, the road stretching out before me, no longer haunted by the past. The miles seemed lighter, the darkness less oppressive. I had faced my fears, confronted my demons, and found redemption on the lonely highway. And now, as I share this story, I hope it serves as a reminder. The past may haunt us, but it's never too late to seek forgiveness, to find peace. Sometimes the road to redemption is long and winding, but it's a journey worth taking. I thought my encounter with Thomas was the end of the supernatural events, but I was wrong. A few weeks after that night, I started noticing strange occurrences in my daily life. Objects would move on their own, shadows would flit across my vision, and whispers filled the air when I was alone. It felt like someone, or something, was trying to reach out to me. One particularly eerie night, I was driving through a remote stretch of highway in Montana. The sky was pitch black, and the road seemed to stretch endlessly into the void. Suddenly, the truck's radio crackled to life, and a familiar voice whispered, "Elias, help us." I felt a chill run down my spine. It was the same voice from before, the voice asking for help. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I fought to keep the truck steady. The temperature in the cab plummeted, and frost began to form on the windows again. "Elias," the voice continued, "you must help us find peace." I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to confront whatever was haunting me. I pulled off at the next rest stop, a small, deserted area with a few dim lights flickering weakly. The moment I stepped out of the truck, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The air was thick with a heavy, oppressive energy. As I walked around the rest stop, trying to make sense of the situation, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned quickly, but there was no one there. The lights flickered again, casting long, eerie shadows on the ground. I felt a presence, an unseen force watching me from the darkness. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice echoing in the still night. "What do you want from me?" There was no response, just the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure standing at the edge of the rest stop, barely visible in the dim light. It was Mary. Her form was translucent, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. She looked at me with a pleading expression, as if asking for my help. I took a hesitant step towards her, but she vanished, leaving behind only a lingering sense of sorrow. I knew then that I couldn't run from this any longer. The spirits of Thomas and Mary needed my help to find peace, and I had to find a way to help them. Determined to put an end to the haunting, I began researching the history of Route 63 and the surrounding areas. I discovered that the highway had a long history of accidents and mysterious disappearances, dating back decades. It seemed that Thomas and Mary were not the only spirits trapped on that road. I reached out to local historians, paranormal experts, and anyone who might have information about the tragic events that had occurred there. Slowly, I pieced together a picture of a place steeped in sorrow and unresolved pain. The road had become a conduit for restless spirits, all seeking closure. One night, while poring over old records, I came across a journal entry from a trucker who had experienced similar supernatural events back in the 1980s. He mentioned a ritual performed by a local shaman to help spirits find peace. Desperate for answers, I tracked down the shaman's descendants, hoping they could help me. I met with the shaman's granddaughter, a woman named Lila, who lived in a small town near the highway. She listened patiently as I recounted my experiences and showed her the photograph of Thomas and Mary. She nodded thoughtfully, her eyes filled with understanding. The spirits are trapped in a cycle of pain and longing, she explained. They need closure, a way to release their attachments to this world. Lila agreed to perform the ritual, but warned me that it would be dangerous. The spirits were powerful, and their emotions could be overwhelming. I steeled myself for what was to come, knowing that I had to see this through. On a moonlit night, we returned to the spot where I had first encountered Thomas. Lila began the ritual, chanting in a language I didn't understand, but that resonated deeply within me. She called upon the spirits, inviting them to come forward and find peace. As Lila chanted, the air grew thick with an otherworldly energy. I could feel the presence of countless spirits gathering around us, their whispers filling the night. My heart raced as I saw Thomas and Mary appear before me, their forms clearer than ever before. "Elias," Thomas said, his voice filled with a mixture of sorrow and hope. "Thank you for helping us." Mary stepped forward, her eyes shining with gratitude. "We have been trapped here for so long, reliving our final moments. You have given us a chance to move on." The ground beneath us trembled, and I could see shadows swirling around us, the other spirits drawn to the ritual. Lila's chanting grew louder, more insistent, as she directed the energy towards the spirits, helping them release their pain. Suddenly, a surge of emotion hit me like a wave. I felt their sorrow, their anger, their longing for closure. It was overwhelming, and I fell to my knees, tears streaming down my face. But amidst the pain, I also felt a sense of relief, a lifting of the heavy burden I had carried for so long. With one final chant, Lila completed the ritual. The air grew still, and the spirits began to fade, their forms dissolving into the night. Thomas and Mary were the last to go, their faces serene as they vanished, leaving behind a sense of peace. In the days that followed, I felt a profound change within myself. The haunting presence was gone, and the weight of my past no longer held me down. I visited the spot where the ritual had taken place, leaving flowers as a tribute to Thomas, Mary, and all the other spirits who had found peace. I continued my life as a trucker, but with a new perspective. I no longer saw the road as a place of loneliness and isolation, but as a path of redemption and healing. I shared my story with other truckers, hoping to offer them the same sense of hope and understanding. And now, as I write this, I hope that my experience serves as a reminder that we all carry the weight of our past, but it's never too late to seek forgiveness and find peace. The road to redemption may be long and winding, but it's a journey worth taking. If you want to see more horror stories, please like the video, share your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Stay with us, thank you, and see you in the next videos.